In the heart of Tennessee, there stands an old hotel. From the outside, it seems like any other building. Its cracked brick facade and weary windows hint at the countless travelers who have come and gone over the years. But under the surface, there's something different about this place. By day, guests might miss the faint sounds that echo through the halls, the odd shifts in temperature, or the shadows that seem to move when no one's looking. At night, however, it's as though the hotel comes alive, feeding on memories and secrets hidden within its walls. For some, this hotel is just a stop on their journey. But for those who work here, like a certain maintenance supervisor, it's more than a place of employment. It's a labyrinth of dark corridors and forgotten rooms, a place that breathes with a strange, almost unnatural energy. As the seasons come and go, he's grown accustomed to the eerie silences, the odd creaks in the walls, and the empty rooms that seem to carry a presence all their own. He's heard the stories, too, about the guests who checked in but never checked out, or the ones who left something behind, something that still lingers. On a fog-chilled evening, he prepared for another long shift, a night like any other, or so he thought. But that evening, there was something about the hotel that felt different. An oppressive stillness seemed to press in from every corner. As he walked up to the building, its darkened windows seemed to watch him back, shadows stretching and shifting as if hiding something just out of sight. Little did he know, this night would be one he'd never forget, a night that would prove the stories weren't just tales but whispered warnings about what lay within. The maintenance supervisor walked through the quiet lobby, his steps echoing against the polished marble floors. The hotel felt empty, deserted even, though he knew guests filled every floor. He pressed the elevator button, its dim light casting a soft, yellow glow over his hand. As he waited, he couldn't shake the odd feeling that tonight was different, that something unseen was watching. But he pushed the thought aside, attributing it to exhaustion, and stepped into the elevator as its doors slid open with a quiet chime. He pressed the button for the 4th floor, leaning back and watching the numbers light up one by one as he ascended. First floor, second, but as the elevator passed the 2nd floor, the light for the 3rd floor lit up, and then it stopped. The elevator had come to a halt on the 3rd floor, doors slowly sliding open as though inviting something, or someone, to join him. He held his breath, half expecting a late-night guest or perhaps a co-worker making their way through the building. But as the doors opened fully, he found himself staring into an empty hallway, dimly lit and eerily silent. The 3rd floor was notorious among staff for feeling wrong. People often said they felt eyes on them, a chill down their spine, or just a sense that they were never alone there. He waited a moment, his finger hovering over the button to continue to the 4th floor, his heart beginning to pound. With each second, the silence pressed in closer, and the hallway seemed to darken, as though swallowing the light from the elevator itself. But the only thing that moved was his own reflection on the metal door as it finally slid shut, leaving the empty 3rd floor behind, or so he thought. When he arrived on the 4th floor, he shook off the strange encounter in the elevator, chalking it up to an electrical glitch. Maintenance work meant long hours, and exhaustion had a way of making the mind wander, seeing things that weren't there. But as he stepped into room 408, that sense of unease followed him like a shadow. The room was as empty as it was silent, filled only with the faint scent of stale air and cleaning chemicals. He began his routine repairs. His next task was in the bathroom. He entered, flipping on the harsh, buzzing fluorescent light overhead. As he knelt to adjust a fixture beneath the sink, the hairs on the back of his neck began to prickle. It was a feeling he knew well, the sensation that someone was standing just behind him, close enough to touch. Ignoring it, he continued his work, focusing on the task at hand. But the feeling only grew stronger, a cold presence lingering behind him like a heavy, unseen shadow. He glanced up into the bathroom mirror, just to shake the feeling, and froze. For a fleeting moment, he saw it, a shape, dark and indistinct, moving past the bathroom doorway behind him. His heart skipped, the pulse pounding in his ears as he twisted around, expecting to see someone standing there. But the living area was empty. No one was there. Just silence and the heavy, dim air that seemed to press down on him from all sides. His mind raced. Perhaps his boss had stopped by to check on the progress, slipping in unnoticed. "Tom," he called out, his voice sounding small in the empty space. Silence. No answer. He stepped out into the main room, scanning each corner, even peeking out at the empty balcony, but found nothing. The door remained closed, the lock unturned. Frowning, he returned to his work, a chill settling into his bones. Maybe it was just his tired mind, playing tricks in the late hour, or the unsettling reputation of the hotel getting under his skin. But deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't alone. As he resumed his repairs, he kept one eye on the doorway, the memory of that dark reflection lingering in his mind. Each creak and groan of the building made him jump, and for the rest of his time there, he found himself working faster, eager to finish and leave that silent, empty room behind. The next evening, he returned to the hotel, hoping to finish the repairs and put room 408 behind him. But as he approached the door, that same feeling of unease crept over him, settling like a heavy weight on his shoulders. He took a deep breath, brushing it off, reminding himself that he'd faced plenty of odd occurrences in his years working here. Just another night, he told himself, as he slipped his keycard into the slot and stepped inside. The room was as cold and quiet as he'd left it, untouched and unsettling. He gathered his tools and resumed work on the plumbing, his hands moving with purpose, trying to drown out the silence with the steady rhythm of his task. But it wasn't long before he heard it, the unmistakable sound of the door creaking open. He froze, his hand gripping the wrench as he listened, each heartbeat thundering in his ears. Someone, or something, was in the room with him. Then came the footsteps. Slow, deliberate, padding softly across the carpet from the door toward the living area. Each step seemed to echo in the stillness, drawing closer with every passing second. He dropped his wrench and rose, heart pounding as he cautiously peered around the corner, expecting to see someone standing there. But the room was empty. Nothing had moved, and the door was closed. He could have sworn he'd heard it open. Just as he was about to convince himself it was his imagination, the door suddenly slammed shut, the noise splitting the silence like a crack of thunder. He jumped, eyes wide, and instinctively lunged for the door, flinging it open. He stepped into the hallway, glancing in both directions, half expecting to see someone fleeing down the corridor. But it was empty, stretching out into dimly lit silence in both directions. The silence felt unnatural, oppressive. He took a deep breath, feeling the cold air settle into his lungs. Nothing made sense. He was certain he'd heard someone moving, felt the presence of another person just feet away. And yet, here he was, staring down an empty hallway, with not a single soul in sight. Unease gnawed at him as he stepped back into the room, his heart still racing. He knew what he'd heard, felt. The slamming door, the footsteps, these weren't things he could explain away. This room, it seemed, held secrets, and whatever lingered here wasn't inclined to let him go without a warning. He decided to work quickly, finishing his repairs in near silence, all the while casting wary glances toward the door, knowing now that he was not truly alone. By the next morning, the experience weighed heavily on his mind, filling his thoughts with unease. Determined to find an explanation, he went to his boss and cautiously asked if they could review the security footage from the previous night. His boss, sensing his discomfort, agreed without hesitation. Together, they stepped into the small, dimly lit surveillance room, where multiple screens showed flickering live feeds of the hotel's empty corridors, stairwells, and the occasional bustling lobby. The greenish glow of the screens cast an eerie light, amplifying the tension that had settled between them. The supervisor and his boss scrolled through the footage, finding the timestamp that matched his late-night experience in room 408. His eyes were glued to the screen as the camera outside the room showed the hallway motionless, quiet, and entirely deserted. He watched, tense, waiting for any sign of movement or explanation for the noises he'd heard. But as the minutes passed, he began to feel a gnawing chill creep over him. The screen remained still, no figures, no footsteps, and certainly no door opening or closing. He frowned, feeling a growing sense of dread as his boss fast-forwarded and rewound, trying to catch any flicker of activity in the hall. But there was nothing, not even the faintest shadow. It was as if the hallway had been locked in time, preserving an eerie, undisturbed silence that seemed to mock his own experience. Frustration mingled with a hint of fear as he realized that there was no visual proof of the events he had witnessed. His boss, watching his reaction, leaned back and sighed. "You know," he began, his voice low and almost reluctant, "I didn't think much of it before, but there's something you should know about room 408. His boss's face was grim, his tone laced with a discomfort that made the room feel even smaller. He went on to explain that years ago, when he'd first started working at the hotel, there had been an elderly man staying in room 408 as part of an extended stay. He was a quiet man, who kept mostly to himself, but was known for coming down to the front desk each morning for a cup of coffee and small talk with the receptionists. Then, one morning, he didn't show up. Days passed, and finally, staff entered his room, only to find him lying still on the bed, having passed away in his sleep. After that, his boss said, voice trailing off, well, strange things started happening. As the supervisor absorbed the story, a chill settled into his bones. He knew now he was dealing with something beyond explanation, something that no camera or tool could ever capture. With the unsettling story of room 408 lingering in his mind, he found himself standing outside the room again, heart pounding as he hesitated to enter. He knew he had to finish the job, but an invisible weight seemed to press down on him, making the simple act of turning the doorknob feel monumental. Bracing himself, he finally stepped inside, feeling the chill in the air grow stronger, wrapping around him like a dark cloak. In the silence, he took a steadying breath and spoke aloud, his voice soft but clear. "I'm here to finish my work," he said, the words hanging in the still air. "I mean no harm." A tense quiet filled the room, as though something unseen were listening, waiting. He forced himself to work quickly, every shadow and flicker of light catching his eye, keeping his heart racing. Then, just as he was tightening the last fixture, he felt it, a soft, barely there warmth against his shoulder, almost like a hand resting lightly on him. Frozen, he whispered, "I'll be on my way soon." And in that moment, the weight lifted, as though the unseen presence had acknowledged his respect and quietly receded back into the shadows. A few days later, just as he thought he'd put room 408 behind him, his boss called him to the office. Expecting to discuss a new project, he entered with his usual professionalism. But the look on his boss's face was unusual, an unsettling mix of hesitation and quiet fear. After a moment, his boss leaned forward, voice low, almost as if he feared the walls could hear. "There's one more thing you should know about the hotel." He listened intently as his boss told him about the elevators. Apparently, both elevators in the building had a disturbing habit of stopping on the third floor, unprompted, doors sliding open to an empty, silent corridor. Even when no one pressed the button, even after repeated checks by the maintenance company, the elevators would stop, as if drawn there by an invisible force. It was a strange phenomenon, one that defied logic, and the maintenance crew had long given up trying to explain it. His mind raced, flashing back to that first eerie night when the elevator had stopped on the third floor, doors opening to reveal an empty hallway. Had it been more than a coincidence? His boss's voice broke into his thoughts. "We've had multiple teams try to fix it," he said, voice barely above a whisper, "but it keeps happening. Always the third floor." He felt a chill settle deep within him, more intense than any he'd felt before. Whatever lingered in this hotel went beyond any repair he could make. He realized now that the stories, the shadows, and the strange stops on the third floor weren't merely oddities, they were part of the hotel's dark secrets, pieces of a puzzle he'd never be able to put together. Haunted by his experiences, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had unwittingly become a part of the hotel's chilling legacy. As he continued his work, the memory of room 408 lingered, a constant reminder of what lay beneath the surface of the mundane. Each day, he took extra care to greet the empty spaces with respect, acknowledging whatever presence might dwell there. On one particularly slow afternoon, he found himself wandering the halls, glancing at the closed doors that had once felt so ordinary. But now, every creak of the floorboards and flicker of the lights seemed to whisper secrets of the past. His gaze drifted to the elevator, its doors standing still, yet he felt a magnetic pull toward it. Summoning his courage, he pressed the button for the third floor, the familiar chill running down his spine. As the elevator ascended, he couldn't help but think about the countless stories trapped within these walls, stories of lives lost, of echoes left behind. When the doors opened, he peered into the dim corridor, holding his breath, heart racing. The hallway was just as he remembered, empty and silent. But somewhere in that stillness, he felt the unmistakable presence of something watching, waiting, and he knew that the hotel's secrets were far from over.